my honor to introduce our first speaker today, Representative Stephanie Thomas. If you haven't gotten to know Stephanie, she's an incredible person. She is a rep for the Fighting 143rd, and she was the first Democrat to flip that district blue. So,
second.
Well, most important.
Feel pretty cool.
She worked her tail off to get there. She became a rep. She's been a great rep, and she said, I can do more. And so she threw her hat into the statewide Secretary of State race to succeed our own Denise Merrill. Big shoes to fill, but Stephanie said, I can do it. It was a tough race. There were a lot of really great candidates, and everybody had their bases. And somehow Stephanie just kept impressing. Everywhere she went, she dazzled. I saw countless Zoom debates, countless in-person debates. I spoke with her on the phone many times. She exudes a warmth and intelligence that is really unparalleled. And there is a reason why she beat some pretty heavy hitters. I know Matt Lesser, state senator, has been here before. Great guy. Hilda Santiago had the support of Chris Murphy and Johanna Hayes. And, Stephanie beat him. And how did she do it? Well, I think two main things. Number one, she is an incredibly skilled and effective and gifted communicator. When she speaks, people listen. She is great at educating about voting rights. This is something that's important to her. It's part of her life story, and it's something that this is one of the reasons she's running, is to teach everybody about the powers that we have, the powers that we can have if Connecticut makes some further reforms. So that's great. And number two, the reason she's here, straight up, she is a hard worker. Okay, she didn't get to be a rep by posting on Facebook. She knocked those doors. She made those phone calls. She wrote those postcards. That's the same spirit that got her to the nomination, for the Democratic nomination. And she's going to keep working. She's crisscrossing the state every day, every weekend. She's amazing. She's got a primary coming up on August 9th, and if you're a registered Democrat, I sincerely hope you vote for her and all the other great Democrats on row A. And then, of course, vote for her in November. But more than that, today is really about justice and about voting rights, and I cannot be more thrilled that she is here with us. I just introduced her in Woodbury, but here she is again, Stephanie Thomas, my good friend, and our next Secretary of State.
What Michael is not telling you is that he didn't ask me questions, he grilled me. And thank you, Julia, for the invitation. Wow, this is a great crowd. Where to start today? So I'm State Rep Stephanie Thomas. I represent Norwalk, Wilton, and Westport. And if you know anything about those towns, it tells you that, I know how to talk to all sorts of people and bring them to consensus. And I never thought that cars would be so loud. Someone asked me in an interview recently, they said, oh, when did you decide to get into politics? Did you always plan this? And I said, oh, heavens no, I never thought I'd be in politics. I don't think I'm in politics now. I've always been into people. I grew up very poor, and, things were not easy. And I worked hard. I went to NYU, and when I graduated, I got a job in the nonprofit sector because giving back in public service is what has always been important to me. And I've always put people first, and I've always believed in working hard to solve problems that government hasn't solved. And I have spent my life working either for nonprofits or later as a fundraising consultant for nonprofits, and I eventually opened my own firm. And I was doing that until Donald Trump got elected. And after that happened, I started paying a lot more attention to how my state rep was voting. I started getting involved, volunteering in my community. And what I discovered is that normal, everyday people who are not really motivated don't know a lot about how our democracy functions, and no one teaches them how it functions. So, as Michael said, there were 6 other people running for Secretary of the State, and while I was listening, trying to figure out which of them I would support, I thought 2 really critical issues were not being discussed. I vice chair our elections committee in the legislature, and we fought really hard last year and this year to pass a lot of laws that would expand voter access, like finally getting the ballot referendum on the ballot for November to allow Connecticut to adopt early voting. We passed a lot of legislation related to registration, like automatic voter registration, but no one ever talks about, it's not a Connecticut problem, it's a USA problem. No entity has ever been responsible for civic education and civic engagement. And to me, no one was talking about it, and it feels like in this heightened era of government, mistrusting government, and that's across all parties, misinformation everywhere. People don't actually know how our democracy functions, how government works, how they can interact with it. And I think we are in a unique time right now for the next Secretary of the State to really bring some time, attention, intentionality, and resources to civic education and engagement, not just for kids, but for adults as well. Because what I'm seeing, and I think we're all seeing with this recent wave of Supreme Court decisions, and we've seen it for the last 30 years on gun violence prevention, policies are no longer reflecting the values of the American people, and in some instances, Connecticut. And I think it's time that we reclaim our government and our democracy and make things work for us again. I mean, the problems go on from climate to gun violence to the shrinking middle class. These are things that everyone here, I believe, believes that we need to solve, but the policies never keep pace. And I really think that's because as a country, we talk about our civic responsibility being to vote. And that is just one day a year. There are 364 other days that are equally as important. And without engagement on those 364 other days, this is why we don't have a very representative democracy. So I got into the race. As Michael said, I surprised a lot of people by winning the Democratic convention. I'm really honored that Secretary Merrill also stepped out of the sidelines and endorsed me as well, which was a huge honor. And it's because we've worked together these last few years, even before I got to the legislature, to make sure that voting rights are protected here in Connecticut and that we fight against misinformation here in Connecticut. Denise got some appropriations this year to hire a misinformation officer, and the Republican nominee, as soon as that was announced, his first press statement was, "Should I be elected, that is the first thing I will eliminate, because the only misinformation in our elections is Ned Lamont trying to grease the skids so that he can have his way with the Connecticut public." And this is what we're fighting here in Connecticut. Most people don't realize a lot of the bills that we've seen introduced in places like Georgia, Alabama, are introduced here in Connecticut. We just have such a strong Democratic majority that we have kept them out of committee. One that I talk about a lot because I'm trying to educate people is about the independent state legislature theory, ISL for short. Republicans have been pushing this for about 3 years now across the country, and it is part of a Supreme Court case that is scheduled for the docket this fall. And what this theory says is it would transfer power to certify and make certain decisions about elections from secretaries of state to state legislatures. Does this sound familiar from 2020? And those decisions would supersede any court decisions. So obviously this is very dangerous for democracy. We have a lot that we have to protect here in Connecticut and in the U.S., and I hope to lead. The office is responsible for many other things that I'm a small business owner, so the business side of the office is really important to me, and I think there's a lot that can be done to help our businesses thrive through the use of all the data that flows through the secretary's office. I always say whoever controls the data wins. The secretary knows how many minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, small, large, and we have an opportunity to interact with those businesses a little more proactively than we've done before. I think I'll stop there. I feel like I'm leaving out so many things, but I know it's a hot day.